Hey everyone, it's Luna, and today I wanted to make a video that I'm honestly really passionate about. This is a bunch of things, 10 different things actually, that I changed my mind about on my spiritual journey. And keep in mind, these are all things that happened after I deconstructed from the religion I was in before, which was a high demand Christian religion. This is after all of that. And if you guys watch my videos, you'll know that after I decided that I didn't believe in this particular religion anymore, which I'd been in my whole life, I was very confused as to what I would believe. And so, just like anyone would, I was exploring so many different things, researching so many different things, different religions, different points of view, philosophies, esoteric things, all that kind of stuff. And so, building my new belief was taking some time, as it would with anyone. So, at first, I went through being an atheist for just a couple of weeks, honestly. And then after that, I kind of went more into Gnosticism. I think in a past video I said I became Wiccan first and then became Gnostic, but it's the other way around. I was wondering if I was going to be a Gnostic for a while, like a Gnostic Christian. And then I was wondering if I would be a Wiccan and different things like that. So these 10 things that I'm going to mention, though, are after all of that, when I started actually developing what I believe now. And so first of all, I'm just going to jump in. The first thing is the concept of dualism. So the idea that there's the physical world and the spiritual world, and they're two different things, or the physical body and the spiritual self. So I got this idea from Gnosticism, and honestly, being raised in a very exoteric or literalist religion my whole life, it was hard not to look at things in a dualist way, because that's what you're taught. There's good and evil, black and white thinking. It's very black and white thinking. So then I started learning more about the idea of monism, where everything is all one. So essentially, the world that we live in now, the physical world, is all like a shared dream. And so really, if it all comes down to frequency, as I've started learning more about ontological mathematics, and I started learning about panentheism, and how this concept exists in like all esoteric traditions to a certain degree. And also, even in Gnosticism, there's the idea of the monad, or the consciousness that we all come from and that we're all a part of. So this one consciousness, we all broke off from this consciousness into little intelligences, but we're all still part of it. We're all still part of the divine. There's no difference between, I should say there's no separation between God and us and God, if that makes any sense. What we call God is actually this consciousness, or this source that we come from. So when I started learning about all that, I realized that dualism is just an illusion. Separation, division, things like that is all an illusion. So that being said, number 2 is white magic versus black magic, and the left-hand path versus the right-hand path. This is something that is very interesting to me. And honestly, when I used to look up things about the left and right-hand path, there's not a whole lot of good information readily available online. You have to get into different books about esotericism, the occult, and different things like that. But when I first learned about the left-hand path versus the right-hand path, I thought it was the same concept as white magic versus black magic, or, good magic versus bad. So the left-hand path, for those who don't know, is not just a black magic thing. You can be on the left-hand path and still do white magic, or magic that is for the good of humanity and doesn't hurt anyone and is all just good, nice magic. And you can also be on the right-hand path and still be doing black magic, for example, or white. it's, you can do either white or black magic on the left-hand path or the right. That being said, the left-hand path is more like realizing that you are God and you are divine and you are part of source consciousness, and you do things like you do things in the occult, you do magic, you realize, you get to know thyself. Know thyself is a huge thing in esotericism. All that kind of stuff. It's all very focused on looking inward for truth. And the right-hand path is, you get very much into things like organized religion, you get into exotericism, literalism in scripture, in religious teachings. And when I say that you can do magic on the right-hand path, there are people who do. There are Christian witches. I used to be a Christian witch back in the day. I had to do it in secret because my religion did not agree with that at all. And for some reason, I'm seeing a huge rise in people who are Catholic, who like to use their prayers to the saints along with spell work, which is really interesting. There are plenty of ways that you can do magic on the right-hand path. In fact, if you really think about it, partaking of the body and the blood of Christ in a ritual every week at church is pretty occult, in my opinion. Things like baptism, that is a very occult practice that comes from Gnosticism, actually, and other cultures as well. There's hints of it in Hinduism and other things like that. Just so many things that Christians do, like exorcising demons in some Christian religions. There's a lot that they do that is honestly pure magic. Like it's magical practice, but they wouldn't call it that or classify it as that. So now I see the difference between the left and right-hand path and realize that I am actually on the left-hand path, which I never thought I would be on. And also when it comes to white and black magic, like I said, white magic is classified as doing things that are for the greater good. It's magic that harms none. It's very much like the Wiccan idea of like the Wiccan Rede or the threefold law. And then with black magic, it's magic that intentionally harms people or is harms humanity in some way as well. It's bad for the greater good. So that being said, there are some areas of magic that are not white or black because they may harm someone even though you're not trying to. We call these gray areas or gray magic. And this is something I just did not want to admit existed for a long time. But the more I've practiced magic, the more I realize that a lot of magic is gray. Just like things in life. Life is not black and white. Life is so, so gray. So many shades of gray in between. So that's something really, really important that I learned. So number 3 would be panentheism and pantheism. So before I became a panentheist, like I am now, I first was pantheist. So this is after I learned about the Gnostic idea of the monad, and I wasn't a dualist anymore, like I was just mentioning in the first thing, when I learned more about monism. When I learned about pantheism, I thought that fit perfectly. And pantheism, you can look it up on Wikipedia. I mean, there's so many things about, there's so much information about pantheism online. And a lot of people see it as kind of an alternative to atheism, which I thought was interesting, because pantheism says, you're God, I'm God, everything in the world is God, this glass of water is God, matter is God, planets, nature, whatever, it's all God. And I thought that was interesting, and I liked the idea of that because it made more sense that everything we see is divine, we're divine, all that kind of stuff. But then there was one part that I wasn't understanding very well, and that's when I was thinking about the monad in Gnosticism, and they call it many things in other different religions as well. In Hinduism, it's Brahman. It exists in so many different religions and spiritual practices all over the world, especially in mystery schools, esoteric teachings and stuff. So as I was learning more about this, I realized that, I came across the term panentheism, and this has a lot less information about it online for some reason, but you can find it if you really look. So panentheism is more like God, what we call God or source or the universal unconscious, collective unconscious, whatever, is in all. So source or God is in all and above all. So once again, God is not a person in panentheism, nor is it in pantheism. It's not like the Christian God where God is looking down and judging people and whatever. This is a consciousness that we all come from and broke off from. And when it says it's above all, that means that we are encompassed within it. We're all a part of it. And we can return back to this consciousness one day once we have experienced all we need to experience in this life, because that's why we're here, to experience. Once we have experienced all that we need to and that we want to, really, we can achieve moksha, which is spoken about in many Eastern religions, which means you stop the cycle of reincarnation and return to the source. So once I learned about all that, it made a lot more sense. And not all panentheists believe in reincarnation, by the way. But for me, all this just went together. It all tied in. So when I finally realized that, it makes sense that a consciousness like that in panentheism would make sense, because not only can there be this world and this universe within it, there can be many universes or many parallel universes or different dimensions or whatever you want to think of it as. And so I was really glad to learn about panentheism versus pantheism. And if you're a pantheist, that's okay too. It's just and I look at pantheism now as kind of a watered down version of panentheism. So number 4 is, for a while, I had the habit of praying to things outside of myself when I was still trying to figure out what I believed spiritually and developing the spirituality I have now. So for a while, I was like, should I pray to my higher self? Should I pray to my guides, guardians, and ancestors? And just all these different things. Should I talk to my dead loved ones? Which, you can do that for comfort still. I have talked to both my parents have passed, my mom passed in 2021, my dad passed in 2022. And of course I talk to them, you know what I mean? But, as in I sit and I think of them and I share my feelings with them the way that I would if they were here. So, but I don't pray to them. I had a lot of struggle with, the idea of needing to pray, because that had been what I was raised with. Whenever I had a problem, whenever I had an insecurity or a worry, I would pray habitually. And even just in my head, if I was in the car, I'd start saying a prayer to someone, anyone that could hear me. And when I was religious, it was God, obviously, that I was praying to. But so after I didn't believe in the biblical God anymore, it's well, what am I going to do? When I have these feelings that I need to start praying, what do I do? So now that I understand the idea of panentheism and that I am already part of what we call God, and everyone is, it made it a lot easier for me to gradually look at prayer in a very different way. So now I feel like instead of prayer, I meditate, or I say affirmations, or I do visualization practices, or things like that. And I also have gotten in the habit of, when I have all these thoughts that I really need to get out, I journal. And I have a shadow work journal that I do sometimes. I actually have a lot of different kind of journals. And during the toughest part of my life, when I was taking care of my dad while he was in the process of passing away, I started journaling a lot. And this was right after I had also deconstructed from religion as well. So I had so many thoughts. I was in therapy at the time as well to help process all of these feelings and these anxieties. And journaling just helped in ways that I can't even fully describe. And it gave me a place to just record all these thoughts and also be able to look back on other things I had recorded before in order to see how far I've come with things. And for me, that has been so much more therapeutic for me than just the idea of praying to someone that's invisible that you won't even hear from, really. So for me, it's about looking within now instead of looking for help to someone outside of myself that isn't even there. So that's actually been really helpful, and it's been something that's helped so much on this new spiritual journey I'm on. Number 5 is the idea of needing to escape the physical world. So when I first started letting myself believe in reincarnation, because it had been something that had been on my mind for so long while I was religious, because the most ancient religions all believe in reincarnation. And so, after I started looking into the studies about all the children who have accurately described a person that they were in their past lives who died, and they found the real person and it was a real thing. I've seen all of these studies, and I just could not deny that reincarnation is probably real. And I can't refute it, honestly, at this point. And so after I started believing that, it was kind of scary, because in Christianity and other Abrahamic religions, you're taught if you're good, you get to go to heaven, and then you don't have to worry about anything for all eternity, and you'll be there with your family members who were believers as well, and it's all going to be perfect, and you don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to worry about coming back into this physical world and dealing with pain and dealing with sorrow and all that. But now that I'm looking at the idea of reincarnation, I'm like, okay, not only have I probably lived many, 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 many lives, but I also might do it again. And that idea is so scary to me, because I didn't get my heaven, you know what I mean? But there's a whole other side to that, where if heaven were real, you'd be really bored and probably be with a lot of really boring people. That's a video for another day. But, so with the idea of wanting to escape, I had that in my head. I was like, well, I have to be able to escape that. And then I learned about the idea of moksha in Hinduism, and it's in a few different other religions as well. And I was really attached to the idea of moksha, and I really wanted to just escape. And part of me still does. Part of me still wishes that, like, after this life I'm just done. But then I recognize that once I'm actually to that point where I'm dead and I'm reflecting on my life, I may realize so many other things that I wanted to do in the world. And now that I have an understanding of who I am and my place in the universe because of this spiritual awakening, and I understand about pantheism, I understand about all the things I've been mentioning, I feel like once a person is at that level of consciousness, they can better choose their next life, if that makes any sense. We can't know everything, how everything's going to go, but at the same time, we'll have a much better control over what might happen in our life, our next life, next incarnation. So once I realized that, I was like, well, there is the idea in a lot of cultures about ascended masters. Some people believe Buddha was one, Jesus was one, Krishna, different figures like that throughout history were ascended masters. And these are people who had essentially reached moksha, were enlightened, understood all the mysteries that we're talking about esoterically and things like that. But they didn't just say, okay, I'm done. I'm not going back into the world. They actually came and chose to teach people and use their next incarnation wisely and consciously in order to help further the consciousness of humanity. And I think that's a really important thing to do. If you have that information and you have that knowledge, why would you not want to help spread it, and help further humanity into, if you've ever heard of the Yuga cycle, we're now in the Dwapara Yuga, and we're out of the Kali Yuga, which supposedly ended around 1700. And we're on an upward slope, meaning that things are starting to get better in humanity. And we, in my opinion, the time for ascended masters to come, or people who have reached moksha, people who are enlightened, we need those kinds of people right now to help further humanity and keep going up. And I think that sounds great. And if that were something that would be my mission in my next incarnation, I'm much more willing to accept that now than I was before. So, number 6 is the idea of ghosts. I used to not believe in ghosts because after I started believing in reincarnation, I thought, well, the idea that there's just a wandering spirit and whatever, they're not going to do that. It's just like the idea of believing you're going to heaven or hell after this life. Why would you just stick around on this earth, wander around, and be attached to physical things? But, not to mention, I got a lot more skeptical about things that sounded too religious or things that sounded ridiculous, like you'd find them on a paranormal show. Like, there are so many ghost hunting shows and ghost hunting products out there that are very silly and can be debunked very easily. And so it's kind of like the idea of fake psychics and stuff where they're scamming people and just all that kind of thing. It's all psychology. If you make people afraid that, and you put them in a dark room and they start thinking that they heard something bump or thinking that they saw something move or they feel something cold brush across their arm, if you make them afraid, they're going to think all these things are happening when they're not. And if you don't believe me, there's a Darren Brown episode. If you haven't heard of Darren Brown, he is a magician and a mentalist and illusionist who debunks a whole lot of paranormal, supernatural things, religious things, and oh my gosh, he's got a really good episode about ghosts, or he features something about ghosts in one of his episodes that is just that. He puts people who are atheists, actually, in a dark room, and they don't believe in ghosts at all, but they start thinking that a ghost is there because they're scared. Anyway, so that's the reason I didn't believe in ghosts, because of all that. But then I really thought about it as I talked to different people who have a spiritual mindset, both religious and non-religious spiritual people. The idea that someone might not want to move on yet and just be in their spiritual form without a physical body, but still roam around and familiarize themselves with things from their life, that isn't too far-fetched. We don't really know what happens in the time between when we die and the time we reincarnate into our next life. We don't really know all of what happens there. We go into the collective unconscious, I guess you could say, which we're already a part of, but we kind of go more into, I want to say something like a dream state. That's what a lot of people think. So in that way, people could still be roaming the earth or roaming in their old house or places that they used to be attached to in their life in kind of a different dimension. And not kind of, an actual different dimension than we're in right now. Now, is it easy for us to tell when a spirit is there or not doing that? I don't think there's really any way to tell. feelings can be deceiving. A lot of people say, oh, I feel my whoever there. Some people may be able to do that. But from what I've learned in religion, feelings can be very deceiving. It's just like we were talking about with fear. If you really are afraid, it actually turns off the logic center of your brain. So we need to be careful of just going off of feelings. It's important to I do believe in intuition, but you have to balance that with logic. So I do believe that spirits can still choose to be attached to a dimension, like a non-physical dimension in this world. But I didn't believe that before, but now I'm willing to entertain that idea. So number 7 is the idea of the Akashic records. I used to think this was so dumb and not very reliable of a concept. Because if you don't know, the Akashic records is supposedly an etheric or cosmic database of every life you've ever lived, every incarnation you've ever had. And some people think you can even tell the future from it, but I don't know if that's very common of an idea. And also you can possibly tell information about other people's past lives as well. And this is where you get the psychic idea or whatever. But for the most part, when someone says they're accessing the Akashic record, they're trying to find out who they were in a past life. So I thought this was really silly because I'm like, well, how would you possibly know? You know? But the more I look into it, I realize that, like I said before, with all those studies of the children who remembered their past lives, I think that there is reason to believe that our subconscious mind or unconscious, or our unconscious mind, at least a portion of it can exist outside of the physical body. And it's the collective unconscious that we talk about. And that unconscious mind carries memories in it. And it's hard to draw them out, just like it's hard to draw things out of your subconscious mind here in your body and your brain that you have now. And it only comes about through things like dreams and trance-like states and meditation and other things you're doing to tap into your subconscious mind and understand it better. And the more I realize that, if you really learn to use your intuition and, like I said, balance it with logic and things like that, it makes sense that someone would be able to at least get glimpses and pieces of information from their past lives. And that would be what we call the Akashic record. And so now it makes more sense to me that that does exist. And I'm all about it now. Like, I've used that type of idea to meditate on my past lives, and I actually got starseed information where I really believe I was a starseed. I'm thinking that I may have been from a planet near the star Sirius, but I don't know for sure. But I do know that I wasn't always, I won't say no. In my old religion, we used to say, I know this is true, but I very strongly believe that I may have been incarnated on another planet at one point, besides this one. So, number 8 is the idea of gender, and that it never changes from incarnation to incarnation. But now, I believe that it does. So, for some reason, I was following this spiritual channel. I won't say who they are or anything. The spiritual channel on YouTube that really insisted in some of their videos that if you're a woman in this life, you never change. You're always a woman. Your spirit is only one. Like, your consciousness can only be one gender. And the more I thought about that over time, the more I realized that we're the whole purpose of us being here, like I said, is to experience everything in every lifetime. Like, well, not all at once in every lifetime, but throughout every lifetime, you're trying to get as many experiences as you can, good, bad, whatever. And so within that, in order to experience everything, you would have to know what it's like to be a woman and know what it's like to be a man. You'd have to know the ends of the spectrum, you see. So it's a struggle for some people to think about this, because you could never, in this lifetime, imagine being so opposite from what you are, you know? And it was difficult for me because in the religion I was brought up in, I was taught that gender was essential. Like, gender was an essential part of your eternity. That's what they taught us. So if you're a woman, it's important that you're a woman. If you're a man, it's important that you're a man. But I really think now that as time goes on and you incarnate so many times, I believe that we choose to be a man or a woman at different points in our incarnations so that we can have those experiences. So number 9 is that the Bible is all meaningless fiction. I used to, for a while I thought that, because I was so, when I deconstructed from religion, I was so done really with the idea of the things in the Bible being literal, that I, for a while, was like, I just can't do it anymore. You know, I can't just read this. But the more I've looked into esotericism and essentially looking at the deep and divine metaphorical meaning in the scriptures, I also see it, you know, in the Gnostic texts. I see it in the Book of Enoch. I see it in the Apocrypha and many other Dead Sea Scrolls. There are lots of books of scripture out there that are extremely esoteric and are trying to tell you these mystery school truths. They're trying to reveal the mysteries to you through stories and through metaphor. And I actually, right here, have a Bible. This is the NASB, or the New American Standard Bible, which is a very, very accurate translation. Probably the most accurate I've seen besides the Interlinear Bible. And this is a journal Bible. So I haven't written in this part. I'm not going to show you what I wrote in the other parts, but this is a journal, or this is a Bible where I record the esoteric meanings of different stories in the Bible. And I say what they actually mean and what the mysteries are that they're trying to reveal. And so I still read this all the time, and I do this with other scripture as well. I take notes on it, or if I can find other scripture that has wide margins, I write in the margins. And I don't think it's all meaningless fiction now. I think there was a reason that these things were written, but they just aren't literal. They're not exoteric, they are esoteric. And there's a lot of code in here that once you understand the symbolism of it, you can't unsee it. It's really, really amazing. And I would highly suggest that once you get past your religious deconstruction emotionally, and you've done all the shadow work, you've done all the healing from that, it's good to get back into it, to see the symbolism and to see what the mysteries actually are that are hidden in here. And especially in Gnostic texts and stuff too. In fact, once you read the Gnostic texts and other things like that, and the Book of Enoch, I can't emphasize that one enough, because it really shows you so many things. But once you read those and you come back to the Bible, you realize so many things you never would before. The last one is the idea of Christ oil or the sacred secretion. I used to think this was a really silly idea, but I kept hearing about it everywhere. Like, it's really popping up on YouTube a lot now. Whereas I think I found maybe one Facebook post and then went to one YouTube video about it and thought it was kind of silly. But the more I research it, the more I see it is literally at the heart of every esoteric and mystery religion, belief system, everything like that. So if you don't know, Christ oil and the sacred secretion are the idea that once a month, when your sun sign, for example, I'm a Libra in astrology, so when the moon is in your sun sign, so when the moon is in Libra, for 3 days while it's there, your brain will produce what's called milk and honey, or the sacred secretion, or Christ oil. And this is from your pineal gland and your pituitary gland. And as far as I understand, from your pineal gland, it's producing melatonin, and from your pituitary gland, it's oxytocin and vasopressin. And when these come together, they go into your cerebral spinal fluid, and they travel down the 33 vertebrae of your spine, and then they go into your solar plexus area, which some people say has to do with your pancreas. I'm not exactly sure, but the idea is that once it's there, during those 3 days, you really want to make sure that you don't expel the fluids out of your body intimately, because, and this is whether you're a man or a woman, because at the end of those 3 days, that fluid will travel back up your spine and into your brain through your cerebral spinal fluid. And apparently it will, some people claim that it creates something like DMT in your brain, like a very small amount of it. And it allows you to have like amazing lucid dreams, have visions, develop psychic abilities possibly, and just overall become very enlightened and have a whole spiritual awakening, unlike you've ever had before. And so once I started learning more about it and seeing the symbolism of this everywhere, like even in the Bible, the idea of the olive tree, or even the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life, those are two different, I could get into a different video about that. Those are two different things, but it all, if you hear about trees, that's the body. And if you hear about the fruit of the tree, that's what's being produced in the brain. Also the idea of Solomon's temple and the Holy of Holies within it, or even the tabernacle, the Old Testament temples, they all have a Holy of Holies within it with the Ark of the Covenant. That is inside your brain, and that's the Ark of the Covenant is where all that milk and honey or whatever is being produced. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. This is the reason why in Hinduism, they emphasize the third eye. It's your third eye opening. It's everything that you've heard about your third eye opening. This is really what it is. The idea of the Kundalini, where the two serpents are traveling up your spine through all your chakras and go into your brain. That's all what it is. It all goes back to that. This is a major secret, apparently, that a lot of people are learning about now. So, like I said, at first I thought it was kind of silly because I thought it was some kind of fluid retention thing. Like I have to watch my language here because of YouTube, but a lot of people are doing, I'll say, emission retention as a practice. This is mostly men doing this, but I thought it was just that. And I was like, no, that's kind of silly. But then when I realized what this is, and it's just 3 days out of each month or so, or if you want to do like 6 or 7 days, you can, if you want to cover your Vedic astrology sign as well as your Western astrology sign. But it's something that I'm getting more into, and I think that it sounds really interesting, and it's definitely there in all these different traditions. So it's worth looking into. Anyway, those are the 10 things that I have definitely changed my mind about on this journey. And that's the beauty of it. When you're looking for truth within instead of outside of yourself, you find so many things that make sense, and you are willing to change your mind because you don't have that cognitive dissonance anymore. You're able to hold two different ideas within your head and weigh them out and look at the logic and reason behind them as well as your intuition. And it's just a fascinating journey. And in this life, you should never reach a point where you're done learning, because that's not the point of life. Life is a school where you're here to experience and learn as much as you possibly can. So that's something to keep in mind on your own spiritual journey, and I hope that my experiences helped inspire you in some way. So if you have any experiences where you have changed a spiritual belief on your spiritual journey or during your awakening, leave them in the comments below. And also let me know what other kinds of video topics you would like me to discuss in future videos. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!